For me, I've been smoking marijuana since I was 12 to 27. I've had only the longest scent of sobriety I've ever had was a month. So when I was going through that whole month period, it was just extreme hell. I hated myself. I couldn't even drive. I hated traffic. I hated how people just looked. I hated how I looked. I wanted to I wanted to get away from me. My anxiety and my hate towards everyone goes up through the roof so much, and I realized just like I guess reality just hits me so hard that I can't deal with life on life's terms without marijuana. I can't be who I am right now, talking to you right now, being super cool and chill. I can't do that if I was off marijuana.
It's estimated 9% of cannabis users will develop an addiction or dependency, which is less than alcohol and nicotine. But for those who start toking as teenagers, it's about 17%.
I gotta tell you, it's a very psychological addiction. When you stop, it's some physical addictions. There's some physical, I mean, you stop sleeping, you get the chills, you get body aches, you get restless leg syndrome. Restless leg syndrome is the worst part of it, I would say. I have no patience. My temper is through the roof, and that is not like me. There's sleep is out the window. Forget about sleep. I'm not sleeping for about 3 days until my body crashes, and then I'll sleep for about 4 hours. And then that'll be my sleep for the next 3 days until I crash again. And then and food is definitely out the window. Don't want to eat food at all. Appetite is gone.
At 15, it meant everything. By the time high school was over, Vanessa Markov and her friends were smoking pot every day. Markov admits she probably wouldn't have listened to anyone's advice, but she regrets spending more than a decade of her life in a drug-induced haze.
I was extremely lethargic. I went from being an athlete to being a couch potato. As a kid, I absolutely didn't think it was addictive because no one had ever talked about it being addictive.
15 years later, she found herself in a doctor's office pleading for help with multiple mental health issues.
I just started to have extreme panic attacks. And very high anxiety, brutal social anxiety, to the point where I had to be either drunk or high in order to really relate to people or feel comfortable in my own skin.
One day, do I want to not smoke marijuana and just be sober? Absolutely. Do I think I can? I don't know.
I'm concerned about living in a culture where I'm surrounded by drug addicts. But I'm even more concerned about living in a culture that worships positive thinking. One of the problems with the cult of positive thinking is that it prevents people from really engaging in reflection and regret. I think that's the fundamental problem we're facing in the year 2020. Not so much the fact that people refuse to acknowledge that marijuana causes brain damage, that marijuana harms them, or in a simple sense, impairs them. Just on a one-to-one, face-to-face basis, you can normally overcome the hostility to the scientific facts through simple sort of Socratic method or explaining parallel instances. If someone tells you self-confidently that they smoked marijuana every day when they were in university and they still managed to get grades that were all A+, let's say. If someone tells you that, you can say back to them, how would you feel if you met someone who told you the same thing, but who drank 3 cans of beer every day? It's possible to get straight A's in university while drinking 3 cans of beer every day. That doesn't mean your life wouldn't be better if you were sober. That doesn't mean beer is harmless. That doesn't mean that beer didn't have any negative impact on your life, on your health, or even on your, say, psychological development at all, right? If you have 2 identical twin brothers and one drank beer every day and one didn't, one was completely sober and they went through the same 4 years of university and got the same grades, which one do you think is leading a more meaningful life? Just on this level. It's quite easy to get someone who's devoted to making excuses to marijuana to stop and reflect and realize, yeah, you know what? I am just making excuses for a bad habit. So the hostility to the scientific facts behind the case are one thing. And that's shallow. We can engage with that on this kind of shallow Socratic level. The hostility to reflecting on mistakes you made in your own life, reflecting on excuses you've made for those mistakes, and really being willing to regret it. That's deep. That's as deep as it gets. And it's very, very hard to overcome that with people. It's very hard for me to even with my own father or with my own mother, get them to admit they did something wrong 20 years ago and just get them to reflect on, why can't you just regret this? You know what I mean? And then I see the flip side of it. I see the other side of it when I openly regret things, and it often astonishes the people around me. Like, I'll just openly say that I regret moving to Cambodia and studying the Cambodian language. For me, that's not a big deal. I can talk about what my hopes and expectations were, what I was trying to accomplish, and then how things turned out. I can regret that. Why not? I can regret relationships with women I had in my life. I can regret choosing to study the Chinese language. I can regret choosing to study the Japanese language. I can regret myriad decisions I've made in my life. And those regrets, I don't think of something, I do not think of the regret as something negative that I'm carrying with me, as something that weighs me down. I think that if I were living with those mistakes, without examining those mistakes and feeling some detachment about those mistakes and engaging in analysis of those mistakes and regretting them, I think if you're carrying those mistakes with you, along with this kind of excuse-making mentality that you never did anything wrong, or you did the best you could, or it was all somebody else's fault, I think that really does weigh you down. I'm now 41 years old. This mentality is precisely what I see members of my own generation carrying around with them. I see them burdened not just by their drug addictions and their brain damage, but by the excuses they are deeply committed to, the excuses they're continuing to make all their lives long. You just heard from a man who started smoking marijuana at 12 years old. There are other people who started smoking marijuana at 15, 16, and what have you. Naturally, at that age, your rationale or your excuses for why, for example, you might believe, well, it's less harmful than cocaine, it's less harmful than whiskey, whatever the rationale you're committed to, there's no way that rationale would endure and still be valid into middle age, even if you're talking about a rationale for something that's positive in your life. My ex-wife became a vegan as a child. I'm sorry, she was vegetarian first and later became vegan. I misspoke. But she became committed to vegetarianism when she was a child and when her reasoning was childish. And naturally, she grew out of it. And I said to her, look, I don't think less of you for this. It's inevitable that whatever philosophy you commit to, whatever reasoning you commit to, from the perspective of an 11-year-old, that's not going to seem meaningful or worthwhile or valid when you're looking back at it at 21 years old. You can say, how did I talk myself into it? This is ridiculous. And that doesn't even mean you were wrong. Like, I do think being a vegetarian is correct. I do think being a vegan is even more correct. But at 21 or 31, your reasons for being vegetarian, your reasons for being vegan are not going to be the reasons of an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old. And for me, the saddest and most dangerous thing of all is that this drug culture brings with it this culture of making excuses. What I hear from marijuana smokers again and again is the claim that this drug makes them a better person. I find that really deeply disturbing. So your opinion of yourself is that if you were not using a sedative on a daily basis, you'd be a worse person. What does that say about you? And what does it say about our culture in the 21st century? That is now considered normal and even treated, most dangerously of all, as a scientific fact.